Call to order the Williamsport City Council meeting of May 23rd. It's 8 o'clock, and we had a slight delay tonight, but we're ready to proceed with the business at hand. Please rise for the invocation by Councilman Don Noviello and remain standing for the flag salute.
We're here again this evening to perform our civic duty. We do so with positive expectations and the hope of good results. The effort is both official and non-official, though the goal is the same: service to the community for the sake of the citizenry. We hope to do our best each and every time we're here and expect to do that this evening as well. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3, approval of City Council minutes of May 9th, 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions or comments from council?
No.
No corrections? Mrs. Frank, on the motion then, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Item 4, limited courtesy of floor. We've had no requests tonight. Item 5, resolution authorizing a I'm sorry. I'm going to move item 9 up. I'm sorry, Ms. Young. The demolition item.
Good evening, Mr. Allison and Council. What you have before you is a request for the demolition of a dwelling located at 1209 Race Street for Knights Comfair Funeral Home. The structure is located in an R3 zoning district, is presently vacant. The owner wishes to tear it down and grass it at this time and eventually add on to his existing parking lot they have for the funeral home. And we do have a representative here if you have any questions of him or myself.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Girardi. Do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? Ms. Mueller?
So the property is adjacent to Knight Confer then on Memorial?
What's that again?
You
I'm
said
sorry.
the property is to the rear of Knight Confer, or, okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Actually, he went through a zoning hearing to have the lots consolidated into one lot.
Okay.
Yep.
Somehow, yeah, okay, sounds good, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Motion passes. Now, Mrs. Young. Item 5, resolution authorizing a contract for professional consulting services. Mrs. Frank, could you give that in short form, please?
Resolution authorizing a contract for professional consulting services with Mullen and Lonergan Associates.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Good evening. You may recognize the name Mullen and Lonergan. This firm has provided consulting services for the city's HUD's programs, off and on many times before. This contract is primarily for the preparation of a fair housing plan. We're required to have this plan since the city receives funding from HUD. It's recommended that this plan be prepared every 10 years, and the city's last fair housing plan was completed in 2004. The payments for the preparation of the plan will be over 2 years, and it's anticipated that the document will be completed by April 1, 2020. We're also setting aside additional funds for the cost of any technical assistance services that are unrelated to the fair housing plan, and we'll use those services on an as-needed basis. The contract period will be from June 1, 2019 to December 31, 2021. The total compensation and reimbursement for services will be in a not-to-exceed amount of $20,000 per year. Also, the contract allows us the flexibility to reduce the scope of work if necessary, which would result in less cost. The process of selecting the consultant was in accordance with the HUD guidelines for procuring professional services. The RFP was advertised and sent to multiple firms. This contract has been reviewed by the city solicitor and by the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Young. It was reviewed in finance. And we passed it with a positive recommendation. There are a lot of interesting facts that we discovered because I never recalled going through this process before, and the last one was in 2004, correct?
Right.
So I didn't just forget about it. I actually hadn't seen this process, and some of the things we learned is it's supposed to be done every 10 years around then, and updated every 4. The requirements inside here can change due to changes in the federal administration. They can make them stricter or relax some of them, be less stringent. So we've been through both phases recently with the changes in administration. This will coincide nicely with the 5-year consolidated plan that's going to be coming up. This process can be combined with that, correct?
Right.
And so we'll have added benefit of the information. The $20,000 per year includes technical services if needed, and those are listed in the back of the document. And they may, to different extents, we may or may not need to spend that money. If not, it just goes back into CDBG. And
Right.
those are the cogent facts that I remember. There's a lot of good demographic information that's going to come out of this about housing in our community and areas of need and all of those kinds of things. So we'll do well to anticipate the reports that come from this, and it will help us eventually when we begin strategic planning to include that in the future of the city and identify areas of needs. So having said that, comments from other council members? Ms. Mealy?
Is it just the case with this, as with so many plans, Ms. Young, that we just didn't get around to doing it on the 10-year schedule, or is it like a funding issue? Or
No, every year we have to report on what we're doing for fair housing, and we've done that, and then sometimes HUD comes back and says, well, we're looking for a little bit more information, or what other kinds of outreach have you done? And we've always been able to satisfy them. They've recommended, update your fair housing plan, you need to do that, but there are no sanctions for not doing that, but they're aware how long it's been for us, and so.
It doesn't actually seem that egregious from a federal perspective, but
Right.
I was just asking whether we'd gotten some sort of dispensation, or whether, we're waiting until they brought it up.
Yeah, like I said, we always have to report on it every year in multiple reports, and we've been able to satisfy that requirement.
Yeah, I know that our reporting requirements are already pretty intense for any of the CDBG activities, so. But it does sound as though this will provide us with a snapshot that would be useful to us in the coming years, so, especially if we can maintain the current level of community development and home financing, that'd be great. Thank you, that's all.
Other questions or comments from council? One other interesting thing that's going to take place, there are some public workshops that, would you care to address?
Yeah, I think that they plan to do 4 workshops for housing providers, and each workshop will have different topics. So that will be done primarily for the housing providers and people that are in the know about the housing in the city. And then there will be 2 public hearings that will be, where that information will be presented. So that will be the public outreach process, which will take place up until the end of the year. And then the data collection and the sort of reviewing public policies and doing some of that part will take place in the first half of 2020.
Thank you, Ms. Young. If there are no other questions, we'll have the vote.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Nubiallo?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
Ms. Young. Item 6, resolution authorizing extension of time for paving. Could you read that in short form, please?
Resolution authorizing the extension of time for the paving of the Arch Street project by the City of Williamsport for the Williamsport Municipal Water Authority.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Is there a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
There's a
Excuse me,
motion and a
sorry,
second. Mr. Girardi?
Yes. What you have before you is one of our standard resolutions for extension of time for paving. This one is concerning Arch Street from Glen Street north to West 4th Street. If you can remember, there was four projects that the Water Authority extended last year, and they were required to be done within 45 days of the plant's opening. 3 of those projects are completed or nearly completed. The Arch Street project, we did meet with the Water Authority, Adam, Mrs. Katz from the Public Works Committee, and being that the construction that's going on 4th Street at this time, we didn't feel it was in the best interest of the city or the residents in that area to try to close down Arch Street at the same time to mill it and overlay. They do have an inch scratch coat on top. It's wearing very good. One of the conditions we placed on it, instead of them milling and overlaying it, they're going to put a 1-inch top coat on the whole entire side from curb to curb. So, and again, the road's in very good shape. There's no potholes or anything in it at this point, and it did go through Public Works, and even though Mrs. Katz is not here, they did recommend it to council for approval.
Correct.
Don't believe him, Randy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I verified. All the Public Works items passed with a positive recommendation. And we don't have anybody to give us a report on that committee tonight. I just might add, we're missing some members due to sickness, medical procedure, duties outside of Williamsport, and I think that covers it. But we have 4, so we can have a meeting. So are there questions or comments from council on this issue? Hearing none. Mrs.
One thing
Frank?
that I didn't mention is, this is a project that's going to be extended into our paving contract, and then the Water Authority will reimburse us for that work.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that also.
Yes. That's a good point. Mrs. Frank, on the motion, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Nubiallo?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, and the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Girardi. Item 7, resolution authorizing grant application for greenways. Could you read that in short form, please, Mrs. Frank?
A resolution authorizing the submission of Greenways, Trails, and Recreation Program the grant application to the Commonwealth Financing Authority.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Thank you. Ms.
Good
Novinger.
evening. How are you each this evening? Before you is a resolution to allow Penn Strategies to submit a Greenways, Trails, and Recreation Grant application to DCED no later than May 31st in the requested amount of $250,000. This grant does require a 15% match of $37,500 that will be coming from CDBG funds, and the remaining balance of the project, which is $81,149.77, will be covered by the combination of local Act 13 dollars and private donations. This grant application is for the entire renovation of Memorial Park's playground to have it accessible for everyone to enjoy. and it was a positive recommendation by Public Works.
Thank you, Ms. Novinger. Questions or comments? This was reviewed by Public Works.
And I actually did have the opportunity to ask a question or two on Public Works. But I just wanted to make sure again, my understanding is that we have a letter of support from the Center for Independent Living, correct? Or the Roads to Freedom, I'm with that, but.
It's on his way. Jason's going to provide the template for me. As soon as I get that, I will have it out. I can reach out to other providers also, as I discussed with Jess.
Sounds great. And we have until the 31st to submit the application.
Correct.
Should we reach out for any other letters of support? Not that one isn't good, but I'm happy to help if there's anybody, if we should reach out at all for anything.
I was going to say,
further.
additional letters of support never hurts.
Right.
So if you know anyone, and it's all-inclusive, so just organizations geared towards children is appropriate as well.
Got it. Okay. It seems as though maybe we should reach out to, Fire Tree Place or other entities that deal with children in the city, and I can talk to you about that offline, or to you, Jason. And then, just to be clear, the narrative that we have is the totality of the narrative required for the grant application, correct? I did think I saw a reference in the grant application to a budget narrative, but,
There's a project narrative, and then whatever the most updated recreation plan is, we didn't include, but you have a copy of if anybody wants to look at.
Got it.
The parks and recreation inventory that we did 2 years ago will be supplemental information for this grant as well, and then everything that you have there
Right.
Will be
Good.
submitted along with it.
excellent. And, okay, so, got it. Yeah.
And we what we can do is, after we submit it in its entirety, we can email it to all the members of council so that you have it.
No, yeah, that's fine. I'm just trying to make sure. I know
Jess
that
will
we
get
have
the big
two,
bound
that we're
copy,
authorizing
so.
2 grant applications in this, at this council meeting, so I just want to make sure that we've got them all together before we do it, so. And we discussed this briefly, but now that I'm here and talking to you in the flesh, Jason, I just figured I'd ask again. But, so just double checking, good. I do think that we should, whether they go in before or after the application submitted, I suspect that we can get more letters of support from the community. I don't think that should be a hard thing to do, and so we should probably reach out and do a little bit more of that, just to prove that there's a desire for it, across all different elements of the community, and I think that would be probably help us make the case.
The template that we'll be sending to the Center for Independent Living, I don't think that you would have any problem if they used it with some minor adjustments for other organizations, right? So I can send you that.
Perfect, thank you, Jason. I believe that's all the questions I have right now.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I can't speak for everybody, but I think we're happy to see this going forward, and it's going to be well worth waiting in intervening time, not having a facility there, but then having something of this magnitude and quality is going to be a long-term benefit that is going to help everybody. So thank you for your efforts on this. And no other questions on the motion then, please, Mrs. Frank.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Item 8, resolution to request an Act 13 hazard mitigation grant. Mrs. Frank, short form, please.
Resolution to request an Act 13 hazard mitigation grant.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Is there a motion on this?
So move.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Mr. Benner,
Good evening.
hello.
What you have in front of you is a request to pursue an Act 13 hazard mitigation grant, and this will be, we're pursuing this through Penn Strategies as well. This will be used primarily for engineering and construction costs associated with the remediation of those identified high-priority deficiencies on the cross pipes located in the northwest section of the levee system. This grant is in the amount of $679.25, which is the estimated cost to complete the restoration according to Exhibit Number 2, which you have a copy of the wood feasibility study. The Act 13 grant will be funded through the Commonwealth Financing Authority. This grant also requires a 15% match by the city. And the city has satisfied all but $13,911.89, and this was through change order number 3 to the MSA between the city and Wood. The unsatisfied portion of the required 15% will be taken out of a $500,000 bond which exists. It's in place for such grant matches, and they're used for infrastructure repairs and upgrades. To speak a little bit about where the city stands and the chances for obtaining and being granted this, being approved for this grant, according to the county, this project is ranked as number one economic priority in the Greater Williamsport Alliance Comprehensive Plan, and number 2 in the economic infrastructure priority for CEDACOG. And this all covers a vast 11-county region in central Pennsylvania. And the deadline for submission of this grant is also 31 May 2019. This was presented to Public Works and received a positive recommendation, and also reviewed by council. And I'm available for questions. Mr. Fitzgerald is here as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Benner. We're going to have to make some amendments to this tonight, but they're in the language and not really pertinent to the grant itself, the money. So are there any questions about this grant or the levy? You're going to wait for the amendments? Okay. Well, I guess there aren't any questions. We've known about this being a high priority, the northwest section, which is up by Reach Road, and
Yes.
with the many businesses there, that was something came up, and everyone knew about it, and we had to move quickly, and the county has been very helpful in moving this along. Well, let's get to the amendments then. On the resolution page itself, the last paragraph, we need to amend it where it designates the mayor, and our copies say the president of city council, to keep the mayor, and the city controller is the other official to execute all documents. So is there a motion in a second to approve that amendment?
So moved.
Second.
Questions about?
Is that a requirement of the grant, or is that, okay.
Mr. Winder, could you address that, please?
And then Janice has to attest that those two individuals are the ones signing.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
That just surprises me. Yeah,
It-
but, okay.
The actual third-class city charter law
Right.
Okay.
requires the mayor, the controller, and the city clerk sign all documents.
Okay. Yeah, that's the technical legal aspect of it, the underlying reason for it, which,
I apologize, that was a draft that we use for townships and boroughs, so my apologies, that's typically, they have their council president
Okay.
and the mayor, so I apologize for that.
and that's
As far as the state's concerned, obviously, we want to be in compliance with the
absolutely.
law.
And just as a follow-up question to that, does that mean that the mayor and/or the city controller will be submitting the grant application, or can Penn Strategies do that? And then we're simply responsible for any paperwork that follows the submission of the original grant application?
We will be submitting the application, and typically always the resolution is a required attachment.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying that we will not be submitting the grant application. We will simply be following up on any of the paperwork post-grant application.
Right, and as we always do, so in this case, it will be one of you gentlemen, will get the packet of information, with everything that was submitted in case there would be any follow-up questions in the future, because obviously this would be something that would be a project in the future, so. But no, it will be submitted in the name of the city with the city's EIN number.
And if I can ask a follow-up question that's somewhat unrelated, this is a partner grant to a grant application in South Williamsport, correct?
Yes, it is. So, and we covered that during the Public Works Committee. So Lycoming County is slated to again, this is not a guarantee, but in all likelihood, get $1 million in flood mitigation funding. There are projects throughout the county that folks were interested in submitting, including Lashy Run in the Jersey Shore area. The county has decided that their number 1 and 2 priorities in the order of Williamsport and South Williamsport are things to get the levee upgraded. So Councilwoman Katz asked me to clarify during the meeting, I'm not doing any free work for the borough of South Williamsport. That was in the newspaper. We're doing this, the county asked us to submit the paperwork for both grant applications as a kind of a courtesy from the city to the county. And we actually have requested that the county cover that $14,000. But for the purposes of the document here, we had to have something that was guaranteed. So hopefully they'll do that. But there's new leadership there, so we don't really know.
Yeah.
There's going to be an MOU coming in front of council very soon. They wanted to wait until after the election, which basically will codify the relationship between Old Lycoming Township, Loyalsock Township, Borough of South Williamsport, the City of Williamsport, and the county, related to doing this. But this is good news because so far, the two major identified issues that put us into the unacceptable rating will, after this grant, have been addressed. And if you haven't gotten copies of the memo, we'll provide it to you. But the county actually has laid out a strategy that we've worked in conjunction with them on. That there is a possibility that if we, that's the document there. Yeah. Oh, okay, so you guys do have it here. And so if this were to be, and I know that plans don't always come to fruition, but if this comes to fruition, this entire issue would be resolved with very limited cost to the taxpayers, and this was a big issue. So, we're very confident that after this, you have to take these grants one at a time, but after the flood mitigation grant is approved, we're going to be applying for money through the H2O program, which is every council member remembers you had asked the governor to fund that program, as did the mayor of Wilkes-Barre, county commissioners here in Lycoming County, commissioners in Luzerne County, and one other place. So and basically what the governor's response to that is that he would be funding it through the severance tax, which is a proposed tax but hasn't happened. But the recent positive news in Harrisburg has been that there is $800 million in tax revenues that were collected that were above the projections. So at this point, a portion of that money is likely to go into infrastructure and to the H2O program. So if we're able to, it looks like the leftover dollar amount could potentially be somewhere in for the next phase, somewhere in the $10 million area. If you were to get a $5 million, it's possible to get a $5 million grant through the H2O program, and then a $5 million grant through the Economic Development Authority, the EDA, at the federal level, which would mean that they would provide, they're each 50-50 matches, and then there would be no cost to the local taxpayers. well, you would be getting, the way I like to look at it is the local taxpayers would be getting a refund on their taxes that they pay to the federal and state government. So in one way or another, you're paying for it, but it won't come out of the city's budget. That's the hope.
Yeah. Well, thanks. That's probably still a little bit of a castle in the air, but hopefully it comes to pass. And it's nice to know that there's a possibility out there, at least,
Yeah.
that we can, right, that we can sort of hope that there's something we can hope will happen, that we'll take this off the tax.
One other thing, if I could, the bids for the RCAP grant will be going out in August, is that correct?
That's right in this first
Yeah, it's
paragraph.
late July, early August, so that.
There's
so-
no definite date, but July.
Yeah, with the bids opening in July, so by August, hopefully, there will be shovels in the ground, which is a good thing, because that then gets sent back to the Army Corps of Engineers. They know, Army Corps of Engineers, they know we're moving forward, and it puts you in a good position when you start to get these grant dollars rolling, and then you go back to the state and you say, well, you've been with us this far, we're getting closer. So, I want to really compliment Mr. Winder and the whole team, and the folks at the county, and for working collaboratively to attack this issue. And we'll have an update on the Graphius Run grant. Hopefully, we will definitely have an update within the next 60 days. Hopefully, it will be a positive update. We know we'll have something for you.
Yeah. Mr. Fitzgerald, the governor's proposed H2O PA program, what was he proposing to fund that at? What level with the severance tax?
You would ask for, the city had asked for $250 million, not all of it for us, but to be funded at, that would be half the Rendell level numbers. And that seems to be the number that they're looking at right now. So that makes us pretty competitive. I mean, if you're asking for $10 million out of a $250 million pool of funds. Now, there will be lots of municipalities that will be asking for that money. I mean, the Lashy Run issue in Jersey Shore is one. Graphius Run, let's say, for example, DEP comes back, which I don't think that they will, but I can't guarantee, and say, that the cost to do this project exceed the damages, they may say, well, we're not going to fund it. Then you could qualify for H2OPA funding for something like that, too. But $250 million, when you look at, there's $100 million in RCAP annually. Those numbers are not nearly as high as they used to be when the programs were created, but a lot higher than they have been in recent memory. My job would have been much easier 10 years ago. It was easier to get money. There's less of it. Although, hopefully, we're going to get back to those. I mean, there's going to be an early budget this year, which is very positive. We're not talking about cuts to DCED or DCNR this time. So I'm cautiously optimistic that more and more grant funding is going to become available.
Thank you. Ms. Mealy.
And if I can ask one more question, as a reminder, on the amendment, but not at all on the amendment. When will we hear about this grant?
At hopefully the CFA meeting in the fall.
Okay. So both of the Memorial Park grant and this grant we would hear about in October-ish?
Yeah, at the CFA meeting. Now, if it's consistent with history and there's postponements to those meetings, the latest that we would possibly hear about it would be at the December meeting of the Commonwealth Financing Authority. But again, with the budget going on time, I think there will be less delays than usual.
All right. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have an amendment that we have a motion and a second on that we need to vote on first. So if there are no further questions, Mrs. Franklin, the amendment.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, motion passes. Now we have the resolution, and there's an appendix that goes with this as well. Does everybody have a copy?
Of the wood?
Yeah. So we're going to, when we pass, that's part of the resolution, correct? So when we pass the resolution, the appendix is passed with it. I just, one further comment on this whole process with the levy is that from time to time, there have been articles in the paper and a lot of information about the problems with the levy and the cost of the levy, but behind the scenes is where all the work and the meetings and the trips to DC and the trips to the state by the county, by the consultants, are doing the legwork and the groundwork to get the funding for it. So that's not the kind of information that you get on a daily basis and that the public gets daily, but I think this is just a piece of evidence that this isn't the only initiative that's going on, and Mr. Fitzgerald addressed some of the other ones. There is a lot of progress being made towards funding the levy project and repairing and doing all things that need to be done to ensure that it's viable for the foreseeable future. And that's not the end of it. There's going to be continuing discussions about how to maintain it going forward under the new regulations that exist and to make sure that we're never in this situation again. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind as we vote on this tonight. So without any other further questions or comments, let's vote on the resolution, please, Mrs. Frank.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Motion passes. That brings us to item 10, certificates of appropriateness for HARB. Does everybody have their list? That was an addition. I'm just going to read who it is and where it is and leave the colors and shades to our imagination. Item 2 is Transitional Living Center at 309 Maynard Street to do some work. Transitional Living Center at 900 West 3rd Street is item 3. Item 5 is White Deer Realty LLC at 901 Vine Avenue. Item 6 is White Deer Realty LLC at 733 West 3rd Street. Item 7 is the Whiteman Block Associates, Spencer Newman at 758 West 4th Street. Is there a motion in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion or questions from council tonight? Hearing none, we'll have the vote.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Motion passes. Item 11, except for filing Finance Committee meeting minutes of January 2nd, 2019, February 12th, 2019, February 26th, 2019, and Public Safety Committee meetings of February 26th, 2019. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments from council on these minutes? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Thank you. And finally, announcements. The next regularly scheduled city council meeting will be held on Thursday, June 6, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. right here in City Council Chambers. Upcoming meetings, Monday, May 27th, City Hall is closed for Memorial Day. Tuesday, May 28th, 11 a.m. is Historic Preservation, 12 p.m. Planning Commission, 3:30 p.m. ERC. Mrs. Frank, have you heard anything more on that item? Is it still on?
As far as I know, I
As far
haven't
as we
heard.
know, okay.
It hasn't been.
So we'll keep that. And at 6:30 p.m., the HARB Board meeting. Monday, June 3rd, 12 p.m., Fair Housing meeting in the Seckler Room. Tuesday, June 4th, 1 PM, Finance Committee, 2:30 PM, Public Works, 3:30 PM, Public Safety, and on the back page, 6:30 PM, Harbor Board, and Thursday, June 6th, 7:30 PM, City Council meeting. Are there any comments from the administration, or from council tonight? Anybody have any great ideas they want to share? Not tonight, okay. Anything from the administration tonight? Pretty quiet there. Anything from the public? Mr. Huffman, you know the procedure.
Bruce Huffman, 1000 Cherry Street, Williamsport. Good evening, Mr. Alice and members of council. I'm here just simply to invite the administration, the public, the city at large, to a Memorial Day ceremony in Wildwood Cemetery. As you know, all Memorial Day ceremonies are important. The one at 9 o'clock on Memorial Day actually is commemorating the Civil War soldiers. It's at the GAR Circle, which is on the west side of Wildwood, and it's particularly moving ceremony. So I invite you all to attend, and I have a reminder I'll give you here and pass out. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Huffman. Any other comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Randy, do you have an executive session?